Jeremy will be speaking on Joomla 1.5 and 2.5 migrations. You may know Jeremy from in the Joomla world as Gnome on the Run. He's been heavily involved in the Joomla project for about 4 years now. He's also the creator of the Square One Joomla distribution. So having said that, I will turn things over to Jeremy.
Thank you. Okay. So, as Matt said, my name is Jeremy, and throughout this time, I'm going to be talking with the assumption that you're familiar with 1.5 and you probably have a site built on 1.5. And you aspire to get to that 2.5 website. If you're not familiar with Joomla 1.5, you'll get to see some of it, but you'll just have to kind of walk through and hopefully we can figure that out as we go on. And if you're coming from Joomla 1.0, well, simply put, if you can get to 1.5, then this will help you quite a bit. So we're mostly going through that, and we're actually going to go through the process. And I say it now, live demos never work, but I'm going to try 2. So hopefully one of them will at least work. But we're actually going to convert my website, which is Gnome on the Run, and turn it into a Joomla 2.5 website with all of the, it's got a little bit of the elements that all migration problems might show. So to begin with, I don't want to overwhelm you, but you really need to know your site. You got to know Joomla. You need to know all the extensions. And it's going to be a painful process once in a while. The more sites you have, the better you're going to get at it. But the first time you try it, I've done it several times and have had different results, or things have not worked, and it's just going to be a process. So it's not automatic. Even the tools I give you today will only help you with some of the aspects. It's still going to be up to you to do a lot of the work, and that's why once you get onto the 2.5 website for Joomla, you're going to be a lot smoother sailing because of the way updates are handled, whereas before you have to manually update everything. So don't want to overwhelm you, but just be realistic with your expectations and the amount of time that you're going to need to invest in learning how to do this. I did convert a 1.0 to a 2.5 site. It can be done, but I had to migrate from 1.0 to 1.5, and then from 1.5 to 2.5. So if you're coming through that process, that's how you're going to have to do it. The big question is, why should you migrate? I don't really like standing behind here, but I got to keep hitting the thing. These are the 3 things: security, your server environment, and the features that come with the newer versions. Your security, if you've not updated your website in the past week, you must. There's been some security releases for both versions that are extremely important. And once you start working with 1.5, after it's no longer supported, you're playing with fire. It's possible that people will find a problem and they won't support it any further, so that means once it's end of life, just like after any version of Windows or any other program is no longer supported, if you keep using it, you're possibly going to get hacked because nobody's going to be there to try and fix it for you. Your server, as we keep going on, we may notice that PHP 5.2, 5.3, those are getting more and more, thank goodness, they're getting more and more popular. And that's the future. In fact, PHP 5.4 is out. So your server environment keeps updating as well. And your hosts probably tell you, hey, if you're working on really old stuff, it's going to start breaking. It's up to you to update it. And then lastly, the features that come with it. There's new functionalities. 2.5, well, in 1.6 and 1.7, introduced a series of new functionalities. And we can assume that will continue to be the case. So that's why you migrate, but the question is, when should you migrate? It's not the prettiest slides, I'm sorry. These are bullet lists of things that I want you to, if you're going to take notes, this is what you should take notes on. The easiest time is when you're already making some significant change. So if you're going in and just, you need to revamp some aspect of your website, don't invest in older architecture. Get yourself updated in the process. Look at your extensions that you're using. Okay, figure out what's available. If you're using an extension that's outdated now, you're probably not going to find a new version of it so that you can't put it into your new site. So you've got to think about your strategy. Okay, if you're using a Kiva backup in your 1.5 website, well, good news is that it's still available for 2.5. But if you use something that's not supported, you're stuck with basically the same problem as if you don't upgrade Joomla. You're working with unsupported software that's out of date, and you basically can't use that functionality beyond your current website. As soon as 1.5 is no longer supported, you should really be ready to move if you haven't already. And a good time is now, as soon as possible. And the biggest reason, I think, is that extensions support 1.5 and 2.5 right now. That's really key because that means you can update your 1.5 website's extensions to the latest copy, and then you can go to the 2.5 website and it's the same extension. So when you convert your extensions, which we'll do a little bit later, they will be the same version and they will work the same way, hopefully, or at least much more likely. So one big thing is, while they still support both versions of Joomla, you want to be thinking about how you're going to start. When you have decided you're going to migrate, because you all will, once you make that timeline and decide, you've got to assess it. What's your extension list? Make a full list. Write them all down. Look at all your components, all of your modules, all your plugins, and go back, look at them on the extension directory, look up what version they are now, if they support Joomla 2.5. That could take you 10 minutes if you've only got one or two. That could take you a couple hours if you've got dozens or hundreds of extensions across multiple websites. But the key thing is, are they supported? It's just as bad to use unsupported extensions as to use unsupported Joomla. So you have to be aware of what you're using. A lot of times we install stuff, and that's one of the problems in web development. We make a website and we hope that it'll run for 3 years before we touch it again. The problem is that that's not really how we should approach it, because we need to make sure that we're keeping up to date either with security issues, bug fixes, whatnot. Once you've looked at your site and you've assessed your extensions, you've got to figure out if you need to find an alternative, what they are, talk to somebody about how you might be able to get there. And lastly, what's the most important about your site? A lot of times when I do migrations with clients, we realize this was a good idea at the time, maybe, or it seemed like a good idea. It would never worked out, it never did what we wanted, let's get rid of it. So it's a chance for spring cleaning. Get rid of some stuff. Make the most of this opportunity, because you can almost rebuild your site with the same things and keep carrying along all of that junk baggage, or you can try to get rid of those pieces and slowly improve your site through that process. So it boils down to, you have several options when you choose to migrate. You can migrate with these two tools, which I'm going to show you. There's actually another one that was recommended to me this morning that I'll try to remember the name of. You can just rebuild the site from scratch. In some cases, that's going to be the best option, especially if you're already looking at your extensions that aren't compatible with the latest version, or it's just, it's actually probably a lot easier to rebuild your site from scratch, because then you know from the beginning that everything is where it needs to be. When you migrate, you might lose track of some stuff. Or lastly, hire somebody. That person should hopefully know what they're doing and can give you the peace of mind to do it for you. Because time is money, and let's face it, this is going to take you plenty of time to worry about what's that worth. So do consider that as an option, especially as you look at the number of sites or the complexity of them. This is the general flow, more or less, that I've been doing when I do the migration process. We have to begin with that assessment I talked about, but then back up, get a backup copy. And then you need to set that backup on your local computer. Don't do this on your live server. Don't do this on your website. you're not familiar with tools like XAMPP, LAMP, MAMP, they all sound funny, but they're basically web servers that you install on a computer that you can create, you can install Joomla onto as if it was your real website. So it's called localhost usually, and you can set up a server. So you want to set that workspace up and install it there, and that's going to be your workplace. Look through everything, analyze your site, and update everything you can to the latest version in your 1.5 site. And then do the migration process, which I'll go into more detail about. After that, these tools don't migrate your template, so we need to follow up and get our template installed and set that up. We got to move over our extensions, maybe some of the data. We've got to verify that everything still works, because it doesn't matter how many times I've done these, there's always at least one menu link that goes to the wrong page, or modules that are missing from some page. Something just gets bumped around. So you need to verify your site integrity by checking every single page. And then you've earned it, enjoy a drink, whatever you like, because you're gonna have earned it by this point. So, some of us, they always say Joomla's all, it's not a Joomla gathering if there's not a beer. So I'd say this is a good time to have one if that's your interest. Before you migrate though, here's a couple things that I would say you should definitely get Joomla 2.5 tested. Learn about it. It's different. It is similar in many ways, but there are differences, and there are some very key differences that when you start to work with it, might drive you crazy at first, because you think, well, it was like this before, now it's just a little bit different, and now you don't know what to do. And if you're already through the process of migrating and you're not familiar with Joomla 2.5, that's going to add to the frustration. So test Joomla 2.5, get a little bit familiar with it, maybe build a very basic site with it just to get your mind wrapped around some of the differences. As I said, always understand your website, always have a backup, and then make sure you get that localized server onto your computer to set up and working. So I'm going to show you two migration processes. What they both do is migrate the core of Joomla. So the core of Joomla is going to be whatever you see when you install it. So that's the content, web links, banners, all the modules. It's only going to do that stuff. It's not going to do a lot of your extensions. Except JUpgrade does try to do a couple of them, although I haven't had any success. So this one is a free option. You can just search for it on the extension directory. It's community-based support, so when it's free, you know that you're not going to have somebody that you can just say, hey, this isn't working. You can either email them or call up or whatever the support is. Community support means you're probably going to have to post on a forum or something to get information if it's not working for you. And it works by you install it in your Joomla 1.5 website. And what it will do is actually download a copy of Joomla 2.5, install it, and then push all of your content to that new copy. So it's one process. The other process does it the opposite, but I'll show you that in a moment. So it's an easy, free tool, and I've had it work in some cases, and some cases it hasn't worked. So it's a good place to start, but it may or may not work. And the guy who maintains it is really good about keeping up with it and trying to always improve it. So it's a tool that is always under some development. So I believe, yes, this is JUpgrade in action. Okay, so this is my website. No. So to begin with, for this version, actually I want to show you the database real quick. If you're not familiar with PHP MyAdmin, you're going to need to understand a little bit about how it works to use the migration. At least it'll help a lot. What it shows you is all your database tables and then all the data inside of it. So what you can see here is I've got these tables in the top, how many? Half of them these are all my Joomla 1.5 tables. Okay. And you notice there's a prefix here of D7FE3, which I'll need to know in just a moment. So that's one reason you need to see what that is. But when you're in your Joomla site, you go to your extensions, install, and find your JUpgrade extension, and install it just like any other extension you do. And if you click on it, this is the screen you get. Now, the process is a one-click, and then it starts to run all of these events. But once it's started, if it has a problem, it's not necessarily very good at telling you, oh, there's a problem and it's not working. It just kind of keeps going. It looks like it's still thinking or working, but it's just hung up on something. So if you have Chrome or Firebug or something, if you know and are familiar with the inspector tool and looking at the console, this is going to show you JavaScript output. If you're not familiar with that, look it up with whatever browser you use, but this will show you, when I click on it, you'll see some stuff start popping up. And it can help show you if something's not working, so you don't sit there and wait for 10 minutes and say, if you're waiting 10 minutes, or if you're waiting 2 minutes, it's probably not working. You could just start hitting Start Upgrade, but I'm going to look at the options here real quick. So you do need to decide what you can choose 1.7 or 2.5, but choose 2.5. The target directory, that's where it's going to install it at, which will be, this is the root files for this copy of the website. It's going to create a JUpgrade folder here and install the copy there. Here's where I need to add in that prefix, which I already forgot. But what it needs to be able to do is link up that information in the database. So D7FE3. Okay. And then a new prefix, I'm going to call this JUpgrade. No, wait. I'm just going to call this JU. And then
so you just make it up.
You make up a different prefix, because what it's going to do is it's going to install 2 copies of Joomla on the same database, so they need to have a different prefix. Otherwise, it will override.
And if you're a little leery about going into PHP MyAdmin, you can also find out what your old prefix is by going to your global configuration of your server.
That's true.
From where?
Right here.
Oh.
Huh?
Well, does it have a trash cleanup?
Oh, what kind of trash?
You're using the same database, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you're creating a new cloning site for 2.5. Will
Right.
it clean up the old table and basically remove them at your discretion later? Or
No. We'll talk about that.
all right.
Or if I don't, remind me at the end. Let's get there. So you can find the database prefix here as well. Not yet. So back to JUpgrade. And then there's a slew of options. You can skip all of these steps. So there's a checks download. I don't know how well you can read that, but it's going to go through a long list of things, and you can say yes or no to any of these specific items. You can skip over web links if you don't want to migrate web links information. And I'm just going to leave it simple. So the only thing is I'm going to turn off error reporting. I think that was an issue before. So hit save. And then go back just to be sure.
Prefix changed.
Huh?
I think your prefix changed when you went out to comment.
Thank you. I wanted this to Okay. So once you save your parameters, just to be sure that they take, go back to the link, double check. Because otherwise you do what I just did and almost wouldn't work. And you hit Start Upgrade, and you wait. Checking clean. It's downloading a copy of Joomla. migrating. Yeah, this is coming down off the Wi-Fi. So the nice thing is it's pulling the latest version of Joomla 2.5. So anytime you do this, it's going to pull the current. Yes?
Does it always look? Didn't it used to pull older versions of Joomla at one point?
It maybe did, but I think it pulls in what's based on the update mechanism.
What was the question?
If it installs the latest copy of 2.5.
Excuse me?
Yes.
So it's bringing down the 2.5 components into your 1.5 version?
No, it's downloading the entire copy of Joomla. So if you went to joomla.org and hit download, it's downloading that file right now. It's going to create a whole new website, or a whole new installation, really is the right way to say it, but it's downloading the entire Joomla package, and it will install that, which is the 2.5 version, inside of that JUpgrade folder, which as soon as it's almost done, it will start to extract. It'll unzip
So
that
it's putting it in that new folder.
in the new folder. And it's going to install it in your database with that new prefix, which I mentioned. And there we go. Please.
So it's downloading it to wherever your web server, wherever your website is being hosted. In this case, is localhost.
Right. So this is just off my computer.
Okay.
You can see is right here. I've got a WAMP install, and it hung. So because it took too long to download, so I'm going to skip. If a step processes and it fails like this, you can try to save it in the settings to skip all the steps up to the one that failed, and it may work. I had trouble with it working, but and the other one, SP Upgrade, does a little bit better job on this. So when I hit up, okay, so it's starting to extract. There's some of the files that are coming in slowly. There's more. It didn't work. Yes?
I got a question. So, just so I understand, so this is downloading a fresh copy of Joomla into a separate folder in my site, and then it's literally going to copy the pieces over and remake me a new site. It's not going to modify my old one.
Because in Joomla 1.5 and Joomla 2.5, the database, that's the real big, most of the problem is that the databases aren't one-to-one. They're not exactly the same. So your information has to not only be copied to the new site, but some of it has to be converted. So it does that, and oh look. So upgrade finished. Great. So at the very bottom, if you get this far and it says this, you've done well. Pretty good. I wasn't sure if it would go all the way. If I click on this, here's the new site.
It might be your template.
No, I know that's a problem, but there's. Let's see if I look at. So this is the database listing now. There should be. Here's the JU content. Oh dear. 0. So I could go back and rerun this whole entire process with, but that's going to take too long. But so that's how it does work, and that's why I said if it works straight through the first time, your success rate is much higher. If it hangs at a process, like it did on me here, because it took too long to download, then it seems to get caught, and I can't quite figure out why. But it's all because everything is sequential, and if one step breaks, it seems that it gets very finicky about keeping on the right track. So what you should do is if it breaks like this, and what I had been doing is you come back, you delete, okay, this is the JUpgrade folder, just come back here, delete it, start again, start fresh. And every time you start fresh, there's actually, in the parameters at the very bottom, delete previous migration. So I think that will kind of reset everything that's trying to do and start from scratch. But if it did work, you would, this is a blank install, but your content would show up, but it won't look right because your template won't be there. Your modules are going to be in places that probably aren't on this template, so they're going to have different positions. You'll think maybe some of it's there, and you might be afraid that a lot of it's not. Once you get the template in, which I'll talk about in a moment after we go through the next one, hopefully that will fix a lot of those problems. So that's JUpgrade. I'm sorry it didn't work, but I warned you ahead of time, so I'm off the hook. SP upgrade works a little bit differently. It's commercial. It's 24.95 euros the last time I checked. So $35, something like that. And it works backwards from this. Instead of putting it in your 1.5 website, you set up a new Joomla 2.5 website wherever you want, on the same server at least, and you tell it where your 1.5 site is, and it like pulls it in. So JUpgrade pushes all the information out. SP upgrade will pull it in. It does, when you do that, don't install sample content. Okay, just a blank install. One thing is that it will log everything as it runs through that step. So it goes through the same basic steps that JUpgrade does, but for some reason the way that it logs it makes it more accurate so that when it goes back, if you have to restart it, it picks up where it left off. And then it focuses purely on the core. All your other extensions are going to be on your own. So I already have set up here. This looks a little different. This is a blank Joomla 2.5 website. And so I will go in, once I get that component, I'll just install it in the extensions manager. So that's the SP upgrade. And it's got some of the same questions to ask you at the very beginning. It needs to know where your 1.5 website is, what the database information is, so it goes through all of this. You can actually pull it from an external website. You technically could, perhaps, the database, but if they're on the same server next to each other, this is a lot easier. So I have to put in my information. It's known on the run, and the prefix was that. And then this is the installation path to your 1.5 site. So if I go here, okay, so it's uwam. Actually, that's my path. I'm just going to copy it right there. And then you get to choose again what you want to upgrade or not. So contacts, web links, banners. Ignore the templates. It didn't work for me at least, so maybe he's fixed that. I'm going to select all menus to move over. And then once you hit migrate, it's going to pop up this window. It takes about 10 seconds for the first thing to show up, but every 10 or 15 seconds, it starts to show you the log of whatever has been accomplished. The smaller your website, the faster this goes. In fact, it might happen the first time around. Okay, it's all the way done. When you see this how to proceed, you hit the end. So since this website, it's simply the core. I only have 100 items in it. It's not, I did it with a website that had 6,000 articles in it, and it took a couple minutes. So just realize that it will take longer the bigger the site. But you can go through here and read all this, but basically it's telling you if everything went okay or not. And process completed, blah, 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 looks on. We're just pretend it's all good. These are notices only because I have error reporting on really high. So they're okay. So what now is, since it pulled all that information in, if I go look at view this website, hey, okay, we've got stuff. So this is the article on the front page. That's my menu. There's a login form. But you can see it's the wrong layout because the template's not there. But the items there, the content is there. And that's a good start for our process. So yay, one of them worked. And hopefully we'll go through and build out the rest of the website.
Is there a max number of items it can handle?
Technically, I don't think so.
Because like K2 only imports like 1,000 or something like that.
Because of the way that it processes, it uses a callback process, so it meters it. It only does a certain amount each request. So as to not overwhelm your server. I think K2 does it at once and tries to do everything in one request. So you have a maximum of 30 seconds. In this case, since it does it in short bursts, there shouldn't be any that last longer than 30 seconds. If you have to change that, I'll talk about that as a troubleshooting tip. But so your process is to get to this point where you can see something on the home page, and everything else won't look right, but we'll get there in just a moment. Oh dear. After the migration, these are the things. Oops. Okay, these are the steps again, just to break them out again before we go through that. You're going to migrate your template. Migrate's not really a good term most of the time. If you have well, I'll talk about just extensions, and you check everything, and then you have somebody else check everything. Because I've migrated and I checked everything and I swear it was perfect after I fixed all the problems, and then someone else looked at it and said, why doesn't the home page work? Or something really obvious. It just have someone else check it, and then you can move it to your live site. Templates. There are two main problems that I found when I started working on. I worked with Joomla Shack for a while, and part of the task that I was given was to figure out how we can make our templates ready for 1.6 and beyond. And there were two main things that I found we had trouble with. The template overrides. The template overrides, if you're not familiar with them, it's a way for the template to change the way that the pages are rendered. So the content component in 1.5, when your pages are output, it uses tables for layout. And a lot of people got tired of that, and as they should. But it was too late to change it in Joomla 1.5, so templates started releasing overrides that did more with divs and semantic, however you want to call them, layouts. But in Joomla 1.6, that's now part of the core. So chances are you either need to remove them or update them. Also, there's one thing called the mainframe variable. It's a global variable. Don't worry about what that means. If you get an error saying something about mainframe is not declared or anything that has the word mainframe, this should be capitalized, but just put this line of code at the very top of your template index.php file after the JDoc or the define JExec, whatever that check is. Put it right above everything, and that should fix that problem. If you're using club templates, a lot of them are updated. So if you customize one, you have to figure out exactly what you're going to do. Are you going to download the new copy from them and try to re-customize it again? Or what's the right thing to do? And you probably should ask them what your best options are. Because every template club depends on what framework they have, if they're using one or not. There may not be very many differences. There might be extremely significant differences. So ask them. If you had it custom developed for you, well, you can try and just zip it up and install it on the new site. That's what we're going to do, because I wrote my template myself. You'll look at the template details, XML, and just update a few things, and then just enable your template. So let's show you that on the new one. I've already zipped it up, so go to the extensions manager on my new site. This is the zip of it. So if you're downloading it from your theme club or whatnot, that's the one you're going to install. Install was successful. Okay. And then template manager. This is one of the changes in 2.5. There's not just templates, but also styles. And that makes things a little bit interesting because some things will not work the same in your head. You actually can have, you know how your parameters in your template, you can say, I want it to be blue or black or whatever. you can actually make several copies of the same style, or different styles of the same template, I guess. It's explained on the documentation. But I want to click on my GNOME on the run to make it the default. And if I go back to the home page and I hit refresh, okay, getting closer. Notice, okay, these are errors, and I mentioned already why this is happening, but I wrote template overrides. And so Joomla 2.5 is trying to use files that were intended for Joomla 1.5. And so, lo and behold, some things are different. So I'm going to do the easy thing and come back to my files. Easy thing is, this is the root installation for the new site here. If I go to templates, my GNOME on the run, I'm just simply going to do this to start with. I'm going to rename it just to get rid of it. And if I refresh, it gets rid of the errors. Now, you can see though it's still different because this information isn't on the home page, right? And that's going to be part of the update process. The menu parameters are different a little bit to the point where now I have to tell the home page, don't display the category, don't display the date. You're familiar with those things, right? When you can go in and set whether or not you want to show all that information. Some of that stuff doesn't get migrated quite right, or maybe it does, but because of the way you had it set up, it's going to look different. So those are the kinds of details that you are, in the end, going to have to manually verify. But let's take a look at template details. I'm still using, I don't know how well you can see this. So even at the top here, version 1.5, hey, guess what? It still works. Because Joomla 2.5 says, okay, that's fine with me still. It lets you still install an extension that's a 1.5 compatible or 2.5. So if the version number is too big, it won't install it, but if it's too small, it'll still try. But this is going to be still pretty much the standard. The main difference between this, you're going to change, if you want to update it, you'll change the install tag to extension, which is a fairly minor change. And this is also on the documentation. But if you have parameters, I don't have them. But if you did, those parameters wouldn't work because they need to use the JForm process. And I will just open up another one that has them. Instead of using params, you use this config fields field set field. So I'm not going to go into detail about all this because you should have talked about this maybe at the template workshop last night, or it's in other places as well. But that's something you're going to have to look at, is if you have parameters, you've got to rethink and find how to convert them so that they work in the new version. So we're getting closer. If I scroll down, I have to fix this menu. Oh dear, I've got like pagination right here. I'm missing 2 modules. Okay, I don't know what happened, but if I look at the first version, the original, I see we're getting pretty close. Okay, so I'm missing the big banner at the top. Well, I'll figure out why that's the case. I scroll down. Okay, so I'm going to fix these modules down here in just a moment. But so I've got a latest posts, and I've got a Twitter link here, but the other 2 are there. So 2 of them copied, but 2 of them didn't. So that's the process when you migrate your template, and you're mostly looking for the overrides, and then if that mainframe error shows up, put a line like that at the very top. You want to start looking at your extensions. I say start with your components. Components are a little bit different than modules and plugins, at least in the way that I think about them. You want to start by installing the latest copy of it on the new site. fresh copy of it. If it has sample data, don't install the sample data. Reconfigure the options, whatever parameters you have. You go to the options or that little configuration button in the component. Set it up the same way. And if it generates any files, if you're like a download, okay, you're using like DocMan or Foca download, any of those download extensions, right? They generate a directory somewhere where you're storing all that. So you want to copy that as well. And then the database data, which I'm going to show you how to do real briefly. And then check all the menu links to those items, because that's menu links are always to components. So you're going to make sure that those are fine and adjust them as needed, because sometimes the options or things might be slightly different. So for example, in here I have JCE, my favorite content editor. So if I'll show you, I have a customized toolbar, right? So JCE lets you change this. So I think normally it's got like 2 more lines and a lot more buttons, and I never use them, so I got rid of them. But I want to copy this information because it's important to me, and I don't want to reconfigure it. And you might have a lot more data than just this, but this is a simple and easy example. I want to get this into my new site. So the first thing is I've got to install JCE. So if I go to the new one here, to the extension manager, here it is. Install. Thinking. And go. But if I go and edit a new article, you're going to see that it's not configured. Oh, I should turn it on. Sometimes I get going so quickly. Joomla should know that I want JCE. Okay, so it's gonna. Yeah, so we've got these 4 lines and all these buttons. Let's say I have a client. They don't need all these buttons, okay? I only want them to touch whatever ones that I already have. Well, luckily, this information is stored in the database. So if I scroll down here, these SP, these are the tables for the new website. So they're in the same database, but since they have a different prefix, they both exist and they're not interacting with one another. They could be on separate databases, really, but for migration, it's easy if they're together. What I need to do is determine what table is for JCE. In this case, it's a misnomer. Normally, most extensions, okay, so here, admin tools, okay, so there's a prefix, it gives you some idea. AK is also, I think, part of Akiba, yeah. So usually there's something here that gives you an idea. Okay, banner, that's banners. Categories, that's going to be your categories. Hopefully, the good process is to put some sort of prefix. But JCE is a little bit funky because they use the prefix WF. I don't know. I'll have to ask sometime why that is the case. Maybe it was an old name a long time ago. But you can see here, there's 2 types of profiles, and the first one here is the one that I've already set up. Because I form select styles, it makes sense at least. Just take me just agree. But what I'm going to do is copy that data. So in the process of this, you export. You want to, now I'll just do it easy. Go. Okay, it spits out all this SQL stuff. You don't need to know how to read it all. But the important part is insert into, because that's the query that actually adds new lines. So I'm going to copy these lines. There's quite a bit there. Okay, copy that. And I'm going to go back to the new website's tables down here at the bottom. Here's the new WF profiles. And you can see there's 2 lines already there because it installs with 2 of them. But in my case, I want my 2 and not those 2. So I'm going to actually delete these. Yes, I'm sure. And then insert them through the SQL process. Make sure you change the prefix. Otherwise it won't work. So this is where it does, if you're going to be doing a lot of database work, it pays to know a little bit about phpMyAdmin, to know a little bit about SQL statements and how all this data is stored. 2 inserted, all right. So if I refresh this now on the new site, it should pull up the correct stuff. Or I broke it.
Do the
The keys are different. In theory, that would have worked. But on my slide, where is it? Somewhere. Okay, somewhere. Oh yes, there, it's right there. Caution, may corrupt database. Once you start doing this, you realize you're playing with fire and you could screw stuff up. So one thing you should always do is back up. So every time you think about making a significant change, back up. Even while you're still migrating and setting stuff up, you can make a backup at any point. So do it. What I think happened was, let's see if there's a JavaScript error here. Could be there's more data, and that's what happens. There may be more data somewhere that I didn't copy that I need to, and I don't know about. Okay, I'm sorry. It worked the other time I tried this. But you get the idea. If you can isolate the database data and copy it over, as long as the extension is the same on both the old and new, there's a good chance that it works. But if you don't copy all the data, or there's additional pieces of information somewhere that aren't part of that, it might not work. And that's where it pays to have somebody come in and do this information for you. Yes?
Just a quick question about what we were seeing when you were in the database. It seemed to me that I was seeing the prefixes, the DF7 and JP underscore and SP.
Yes.
JU underscore. So now, which database is that? Your original one, or
So each of
the same?
All 3. Okay. So there's the original, which is this one, the D7, so on. The JU, which was the J upgrade attempt that didn't work. All of them are being stored in the same database, but because they have different prefixes, each Joomla site ignores the rest of them. It only looks for tables with that prefix.
What confuses me is I thought in this SP approach, you first start with a clean new install.
Yes.
Oh, but you never changed the database. So this would be dangerous to be doing to your live.
Exactly.
site.
Never do this. Yes.
No, because,
That's a
okay.
good reason.
Yeah.
So the SP tables that are down here, these are
From
formatted for Joomla 2.5 and are connected to the new site. I still have the old ones there, which so everything will still work on this one. If I refresh, it should be fine because I haven't actually changed the database or the tables.
Those particular tables. Yeah.
For this site, only for the new one. And that's, again, being very methodical about each step you take, making sure that the information maps correctly to what you're doing. I need to keep going though. How am I doing on time? I got
About 12 minutes or something.
12 minutes, yeah, okay. Modules. Some of the modules changed. Like mod latest is now mod articles latest. They just changed the name of some of them, but they're the same basic thing. But for some reason, they don't migrate correctly. So you'll have to reconfigure those. And that's part of what I had at the bottom of my site. When the 2 were missing, one of them was mod latest. And I just have to set it up now in the new site as mod articles latest. Well, okay, that's not too hard. But you need to check them all and reconfigure your options. So there's none of the data copying over because modules don't have tables. plugins don't have tables in the database. So you shouldn't have to copy anything. And the easiest thing for you to do is to just reconfigure them all. Look at it, how it's set up in your old site. Pull up the edit page for the plugin. Pull up the edit page for the plugin in the new one and the old one, and check the parameters so they're the same. And do that for each of them. You'll work through it, but obviously this is where it pays to have as few things on your site as possible, because as you move through it, it's going to take you longer and longer. So your big challenges are going to be that the core output changed in 1.6 through now. You're going to have to reconfigure your modules. You might have legacy code in the extensions that doesn't work, or doesn't work on the current version of PHP or whatnot. There's possible situations. Your URLs might change. You're going to have to check to see how those are all set up. You can get them to stay the same, but if you're not careful, they could very easily change. Your data, even if you can copy it over, sometimes it has to be converted. So the columns in the database might change over time, and if you're not keeping up with stuff, your data will not fit. It's just like if it needs 10 columns, but you only have 8, it's going to say, hold on, I don't know what to do. So be sure you're keeping things up to date. I've found that it's really difficult, even having done it several times, to isolate the problem, what's not working, especially during that first few steps. Once you got your site kind of running, you get your template up, you're getting closer, it's a lot easier from there on. But to the point where you have that content in your site, that can be difficult to isolate. And then you've got to make sure that you get all non-Joomla files. So if you add in a bunch of documents somewhere on your website, you got to copy those over too. And it can be easy to forget that they're there because they're not technically part of Joomla. Okay, so tips. Back up first. Set your error reporting to extremely high, and do this in your PHP ini file. If you're not familiar with that, you can Google how to do it with whatever server you're using. Use PHP 5.2. You have to, because Joomla 2.5 does not run on PHP anything less than that. And try to do it on 5.3 if you have. If you're starting to run into problems where things time out and they hang, increase this in your PHP ini max execution time. That's going to give, right now I think by default it's about 30 seconds. So if it doesn't finish whatever it's told to do within 30 seconds, it just stops. It gives up. So you can change it to 60, 120 seconds. Gives you a little bit more leeway if your computer is not as fast as it needs to be. And then you need to install all your extensions before you copy everything over. This is a quick flowchart. It's available online as well. Here's how you think about going through the process. If you're on a 1.0 site, use the migration tools that are outlined on the documentation. But really, the key thing is for 1.5, are they compatible? Are your extensions compatible? If so, use your migrator tools. There's no reason to go to 1.6 or 1.7. Go straight to 2.5. It's the one that's being supported, and that's the one that's getting the bug fixes and security issues. These ones both have now security issues that are unresolved, but they are here. So don't bother going to either of those. Go straight there. And then beyond this, what's going to be really great is you'll be able to stay updated. And I think a good philosophy is to stay updated between the major series. And I say that's the first number. We have kind of got to change our mental thinking, because if you could just pretend that Joomla 1.6 and 1.7 were like 2.0 and 2.1. Just change them in your head and just pretend they're the same. Because they're sort of the same series. 3.0, which will be coming out, well, Andy will tell us later, is going to be a new series, which can be, we're not completely sure, but we'll hopefully be able to update easily too, but at the same time, it's probably going to have some major changes. And so you don't maybe want to get to that right away. It's not what's called a long-term supported release. Only the 0.5, whatever 0.5 is the long-term release. Those are the ones you want to be on if you're a stable website person unless you want to be regularly checking and updating and going through all that. You're going to see a lot more improvements, hopefully faster through this process because we're releasing Joomla more frequently, but more smaller iterative changes over time. So instead of seeing big changes like we have, you'll get to see small improvements coming along quicker. And then it should be easier to stay updated over time, and your extensions will eventually only be supporting what Joomla supports. So that's important to remember. Whatever Joomla supports, extension developers are likely to do as well. So at this point, I know some people have said they've got like 5 sites they need to move and what. So what kinds of questions do you have?
Are your slides going to be somewhere where we can get?
I can put them up somewhere, and I will somehow get that information out. So, yes.
I just wanted to make a comment about we've migrated at more 7 to 10 sites, and our experience with J Upgrade was that I think we migrated 2 or 3 with J Upgrade. They looked fine until we had to try to do something else with the site, and we found out that it was just totally screwing up the database, and we won't use it anymore. And we've used ST Upgrade, and it has consistently produced a few results that I find slightly odd. Whoever was added as the super admin in the 1.5 install, when that gets migrated over, a V1.5 is added to the end of that super admin's email account. So I always have to go in and change that account will work. And the other thing I found consistently is that on all the menus, I think it's either the article or page display parameters, they will say like, no, do not display the page titles. Yes, page title. However, the page title will display on the front end. So I have to go through every single menu item on every single menu, re-click the no, which is already says no, or just go into that menu item and click save and exit all the way through. Because otherwise, it's displaying page titles even though it doesn't think it is. So
You're resetting the parameters.
yeah.
Right, because some of that information, the way it's stored, is different. And it can be, that's why you've got to check everything thoroughly, and especially the menu items and your components, every page that you can check. There really aren't pages, and that's always a hard thing to get across, but Joomla has an infinite number of possible pages depending on how it's built, but each of the menu items is definitely something you need to very well check and see the modules and the parameters are all the same. You might have to go and resave all that information.
Can I just make a mention on that? Sometimes what you'll find when new things get added or they've been moved, if you go and you bring it up to look at it, and it looks like what you're expecting, like it says no or something, but it's not acting like that, what can happen is that can be what the default parameter is. So since it doesn't have anything, it'll show you that, but if that's not what's going to be in your database, because your database doesn't have anything in it. So by saving it, you're then saving that no to actually say it's no instead of it just not having anything.
Right.
So that's why you can have a problem.
It makes the data, it saves the data hopefully correctly. So if you're seeing that problem, make sure you just go in and save, make sure it gets reset correctly. Yes.
Quick template question. I'm sorry, I'm soft-spoken by nature, I think. I've done maybe 4 of these migrations, and I struggle sometimes with the template, and I wasn't clear. I was trying to get a process here. You're starting with your old files and then modifying them. What I have done, if you don't mind me telling you real quick, is I've started with a really fresh, clean template install, basically like a blank, like a wireframe, and I've just taken the old HTML and CSS, pasted it in, and then modified the you know, to make them flat back up and grab the right handles. Am I off base in doing that? Is there a better way than what I'm doing? I was afraid of running into those override things because I didn't know how to fix them.
Right. Well, that's a fair way. So the process he's suggesting is to start with a blank.
What I'm suggesting.
Well, that you've done.
Wondering.
That's a valid way, and there's no right or wrong way. If you get to the right result at the end, great. My process was, because I know my template that I wrote is very, very basic, it has just what it needs and nothing more, there's a pretty good chance that it's all right. Plus, I checked it. But the more complex it is, the little more difficult that's going to be. So if you want to start with a blank 2.5 starter site and then try to copy in and everything, if that works, great. I think that's a great way to do it. Because that way you know it's going to be 2.5 ready and standardized. And then the overrides, yeah, you won't have to worry about that. But you might have to update your CSS and that kind of stuff because maybe the name of one of the classes has changed. I can't remember, but
So yeah, did you largely avoid that in your process? Because I had to redo a lot of the CSS or just find the right selection and things like that.
I didn't apparently write a lot of class names, so I targeted in different ways. Yeah, it's going to be a mixture depending on the complexity of your template, the complexity of the components you're using. You're really going to have to know something about your templates to really do it well. And whatever process gets you there, the best for you, I'd go for it. As long as you get to the end product, I think, as long as you're not hacking away at a bunch of stuff. Templates are pretty for you. Yes?
So let's say your site is so hacked over and abused that J upgrade and SP upgrade is not going to do it.
Okay.
And I mean, I'm just saying, I can only imagine do the upgrade kind of piecemeal. A lot of custom components, they'll need a lot of work. But what about the core thing? It seems what would make sense to me is I could just do the articles and categories and stuff over and start from there. But are those tables different between 1.5 and 2.5? What's the migration for that?
There are
some PHP might have been or mainline tools are no problem. Whatever.
Okay. That maybe is where the tool, I can remember. Is it J2XML? J2XML. This is a tool that's far less extensive if you want to copy over just your content, your categories, and I think menus. So it only does a few of the pieces, but what it does, and who told me? They said it was really good, and the reviews are pretty high on it. So you install it in your site, you install it in both of your websites, it exports it from one, and then you just import it through the other one. So that's an option maybe for you if you want to do just parts of it.
Rebuild from there.
And yeah, rebuild the rest of it. So
Does that rebuild the asset table as well?
it must. Yeah, that's one of the big things with categories are very different because they are nested, and then there's a complicated way, but they're not equal in 1.5 and 2.5, so you have to convert all of them. And so hopefully this can do that.
Plus you've got the asset table, which is the permissions table, and that hooks into your content and to your categories. So that has to get created. It's got all these internal ID kind of things too.
It can get very hairy if you're not sure. Yes?
I just wanted to add that I'm just reading it through 1.5 support and then push back to September this year.
Okay.
So start your migrations now.
I couldn't hear what you said.
Joomla, okay, he was saying that and this has been a discussion, but I guess they finally made a decision that's concrete. Support for Joomla 1.5 was going to end sometime in April. Tomorrow?
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow's
April.
Okay.
No, I guess not.
I don't know what day it is anymore. Was going to end tomorrow. It's now whenever 3.0 comes out, so in September. So you've got another, what?
Well, the semi-official
5
one
months,
that we're talking
6 months?
is September 2012 for just security updates.
Right.
And possibly, if you're running PHP 4, and we can't get an easy, and we can't easily do a security update for the PHP 4, but we've got one for 5.2, we might not upgrade the security if you're on 4.4. The theory being, if you're still on PHP 4, you don't care about security anymore.
Yeah, you got bigger problems.
You got
around
bigger
PHP
problems.
4. That's a different talk. But
Wasn't he fabulous?
you're great. Yeah, I feel like the guy with the...
That's right.
Yeah.
You're done.